Thanks so much for coming by today and checking out the video. If this is your first time checking out any of my stuff, there are a bunch of affiliate links down below. I appreciate it if you check that stuff out. Today, I'm excited to bring you guys another conversation. And today I'm chatting with my friend Warren David. Warren is a mixer based out of Nashville. He's done a lot of Atmos stuff. And when I was first getting into doing Atmos, he was a big help for me in getting started. Warren's worked with artists doing Atmos mixes like Keith Urban, Thomas Rhett, Lainey Wilson, Jelly Roll, Chris Tomlin, Phil Wickham. There's just a lot of artists he's worked for. I think at this point he is closing on 1,000 Atmos mixes out. So he's got a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom, and he shares a ton of that in this video. I've gotten a lot of stuff from him in the past, and I learned a bunch of new tricks, and I'm really excited to share that with you. Before you hop into the video, there are a couple of songs that we are talking about within our conversation. One of them is a Brandon Lake tune called Palm of Your Hand, I believe. And then there was another one, I think the song was Gardens. I'm going to put links to both of those songs down below. So if you want to listen to those, you can pause this video, go listen to those songs in your Atmos setup before we get started, and then you'll have a little bit of context for some of the stuff we're going to talk about. I'll also put a playlist link down there to a bunch of other Atmos stuff that Warren has done if you want to check out some of his other work, and a link to his website because there's great resources up there and you can learn more about all the stuff that he's done. So with that said, let's hop into our conversation. I think you guys are going to enjoy this and get a lot out of it. Please leave me a comment if you are enjoying this. If there are other things you think I should talk to other engineers about, please let me know down below. And with that, let's dive in. Warren, thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate this. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you, because I know I've stolen a lot of tricks and things from you over the years, and now I'm going to steal a whole bunch more. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, man. Well, honored. You're definitely like an advocate for the Atmos community and like bringing knowledge to the people. So I'm grateful for you and what you do. So
yeah. Hey, real briefly, let's just get some stuff out of the way for people. Just real quick on your background. Like, how long have you been working on Atmos stuff? Like, do you even remember when you started?
Yeah, it was kind of right before Apple announced that they were going to release Spatial, which was beginning of 2021. So right then I was considering it, and as soon as Apple announced, I was like, yeah, I think I need to do this to serve the community I'm in.
That's cool. And now you've mixed about 7 billion songs in Atmos since then. So
yeah.
Do you even keep track? You never struck me as someone who is keeping track of all that kind of stuff. Or maybe you are actually.
Oh, I'm very much. I probably keep track more than any. I'm actually right now with some people building a package of tools that are like the music maker's organizational toolkit. Like, I have metrics on everything I've worked on.
That's cool. But you never strike me as somebody who's like, you don't care about, like, you track it, but you're not like, you know.
I don't get wrapped up in where the song goes, but yeah. I like having the information there to, like, you know, in a moment like this, going back and saying, okay, Atmos mixes, 926. So like, awesome. I can like pinpoint.
But yeah, like, you're not posting like your Muso, 7 gabillion stream pages like some guys. Like, I never got the impression that that's really your thing.
I mean, no, of course, internally you struggle with like, am I valuable to the community? Like, am I worth something? What's worth to share, just from a sense of like, I'm proud that I worked on this. Like, I'm glad and proud and grateful, and I want people to know and see it. because that does help sustain work. But also there's that internal sin battle of like, am I putting too much of my identity in this? Or am I like sinfully wanting people's approval from this? And so hopefully it's just a like nice metric to know. And yeah, like.
So with the Atmos stuff that you've been doing, and maybe it's shifted over the years, how much of that has been you're doing an Atmos mix of something where the stereo mix was done by somebody else versus how much of it is, you know, a song that you have basically been mixing from start to finish? You did the stereo as well.
Yeah. But just because of the way that I entered Atmos, like the labels were already kind of lined up with me as like one of the few people in Nashville when it came out, especially in my circles. And so because of that, I got a lot of label releases that already had mix plans and even back catalog from that. So, I mean, yeah, those metrics, like almost 1,000 Atmos mixes, but only 104 of those have been combo, like where I did the stereo and Atmos at the same time.
That's cool. So let's just talk about kind of general Atmos mixing, Atmos philosophies. When you're working on an Atmos mix, like what are your goals? Do you have like a overriding philosophy in what you're doing?
Yeah, because of how volatile it is to listen to, like spatial algorithms are changing, the way people are listening, just it could be a lot of different variables. So my overall goal, or the master goal, is match the stereo. I don't want it to be a diversion from the vibe, the intent, and the hard work that went into making that stereo. So I'm not adding a ton of reverb to put it in Atmos so that when it folds down, it's a totally like wet mix. So the first part is staying faithful to the stereo and making sure that when someone's flipping back and forth or someone's approving it, they feel like the Atmos does it justice. From there, the goal is what ingredients do I have and how can I maximize using the space of Atmos, but not just the space, the effect of Atmos. Because Atmos isn't just let me pan things around and like use the real estate. I use a ping pong delay as an example, that since we have stereo, someone figured out that you can like ping pong and utilize a left and a right. So when we talk about utilizing a space, like you can make a mix breathe more. It's not just like breathe and ping pong between two speakers or have a, center and left and right or center and sides, but you can like now have this depth that breathes into the room or pushes and pulls focus. So it's like, how do I, in the Atmos mix, do something interesting with the song based on the ingredients?
Yeah, like one of the tracks that you had told me to listen to, was that, I think it was the Brandon Lake Palm of Your Hand one.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I thought was really cool in it was it felt like, it's like there was spatial movement, but it wasn't from like, I'm going to fly this guitar over here. It was like different parts of the songs used different parts of the space, like in my room. Like it was going and it kept it really interesting. And like, I think there were some places where there was some stuff that was doing that kind of, movement, but I just liked more how it was like, now I feel like this thing behind me, and it does a different kind of emotional support, I think, for the song in that place versus just like having everything up front and then like some ambience behind you. So like, what are you thinking about when you've got the mix, you've got it to where you're honoring the stereo? How are you thinking about how you are bringing things into the space and making use of the space?
Yeah, Palm of Your Hand is a great example of that because it's very ingredient based. you know, like not only from a parts perspective, but how it's split out. Like there were two loops in there in the stems, whereas if there was just one stereo loop track, you're kind of like stuck with how you can pull that apart unless you just chop it. You know, you could edit it up and separate things out. But there were two that were like syncopated and playing off of each other. And so the way that I spaced those, it comes in after chorus 1 in verse 2. So one loop is in the fronts and another loop is in the sides. So you get this boom, doo, 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 doo. Just naturally those parts did that. And then the other part of it with those ingredients is there's these moments and swells, especially the chorus, where even from a part perspective, you get a part and then it goes away. It breathes. So like letting that come through this speaker and then that speaker and then this part swells behind you naturally. Like I don't have to create a panning move. Your ear kind of just does that when it flashes, you know? And so to me, I was almost kind of conducting the room, like conducting the parts. Like, how do I hear those parts going out? And then, yes, pull, like I'm sitting there stretching my hands. Like, what does it feel like? And I don't know that there was a lot of panning automation with that. It was mostly just each little part. Where can I just place this in this moment? Instead of like panning an object is what I mean. Yes, there was panning, but like I'm not automating an object to do something like what everyone thinks.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of people who are first looking at, they're thinking, oh, I'm going to automate all this stuff moving around. And I mean, you can do that. I mean, I think the thing I usually recommend is when everybody's starting, like do that on everything. Just get it out of your system because it's not going to be appropriate, you know. Put that Atmos Music Panner plugin on everything and just go crazy and get it out of your system, and then you can sit down and actually get to work. But when you've got a track like that that's coming in, like that Brandon Lake, you know, what's your process? Do you listen to the stereo first, or do you go straight to the stems and like listening to what the parts are that you actually have to work with? How do you generally approach that?
Yeah, the first thing I'm doing is making sure that what I was given in STEM world recalls the stereo. So like before I even start panning or doing anything, I'm making sure the balances are right, the tone is right, even the impact. You know, maybe there's some times where the stems, they backed off a limiter, or because of how intensely they were going into compression or limiting on their bus, I might have to recreate some of that pump that was missed in the individual stems. So there's a bit of that recreation of the recall, but like once that's stable and I'm like, okay, I've listened through, I've made sure every part is there. Like sometimes, oops, someone forgot to send a stem, or like there was a missing audio and like they missed the thing. So there's that. But then, yes, there's the discovery of the parts. Like what parts was I given, and like where do my instincts tell me this can live? So like if there's like 4 guitar tracks, I might figure out what is this one. They're all named EG1, EG2, EG3, like that. So I might rename them, or at least like group them together, put them in folders, figure out which ones complement each other. How might I use that space? So I'm making mental notes during that discovery of the tracks. And then it's like, yeah, start panning around and seeing what works, what doesn't work.
Yeah, because you're like basically 1,000 songs deep into doing this now. I would imagine that some of those moves are a little more intuitive for you now in terms of what's going to work in different places. What was your process like, though, figuring that out? You know, when you were on mix 5, mix 10, if you can think back to just starting out, because I think a lot of guys who are going to be listening to this conversation, they are not 1,000 songs deep. I mean, I'm not even close to 1,000 songs deep on this. Do you just pull something up and try it everywhere?
Yeah, I think what part of what we're talking about is like the maturity of engineering. Like how do you mature into instinct? Like, how
Yes.
do you get the wisdom? Like, you can have a lot of theories, but until you start putting into practice, it's not true wisdom. So those first couple mixes, you know, you go into it timidly, like it feels fragile. Like, all right, I don't want to screw this up. Like, maybe you're being a little more conservative with your panning. But yeah, then you start seeing what you start experiencing what works and doesn't work. And by work, I just mean especially with a room. It's very hard to hear this on headphones. Headphones is really just a filter, but what I discovered is something called room weighting. So WEIGHT. And to me, that's like, where's the foundation of the song and how do you extend it, not just separate it? Because separating things out, you might leave things untethered and it might feel, the whole mix might feel disjointed in a room. In headphones, it might come back down, it's fine. But also, like, in the room, there can be some more optimal positions than others. So yeah, it's just panning and going, oh, like if I take this guitar out of the front and put it in the sides because I want it to be wide, and you listen and you're like, I'm missing something in the front. I actually created a void. Instead of extending the mix, I'm just like creating vacuums, and the mix is fighting with itself. So like over time, I feel like I just learned a bank of what not to do, or what's like if then, like conditional placements almost. Like, well, make sure you take care of this thing first. Here's your priority, and then experiment with bringing it out. And if that works, cool, leave it. Now move on. Now that that's taken care of, what's your next priority? So just over time, it was learning priorities. And again, like you said, pan things around, go nuts, go crazy. If all is on, there's no moment of off. So
Right.
so with Atmos, people might think, oh, I just need to get everything everywhere all at once. And sometimes you need the focus of like, I might just keep it mono for the first half of the song so that when this chorus hit, it explodes into the room and there's like this gratification of Atmos. You know, it's not just like, I mean, you get what I'm saying. You're
Yeah.
utilizing the push and pull of moments as opposed to like everything loud all the time.
Right.
Tension, release, you know,
Yeah,
dissonance, resolution.
you've got to have contrast to keep things interesting. If everything is everything all the time, it's boring to me anyways. I mean,
Mhm.
but I feel like when I start talking about this, I'm like moving into you kids get off my lawn territory, which is where I really don't like to be. So, in terms of placement and stuff, I don't know that I want to get too specific because I don't like giving people necessarily too many recipes for things, because I
Mhm.
think part of the thing that's really cool to me about Atmos is, or just immersive mixing in general, is there's a lot of different ways we can kind of approach this. And one of the things that when I think about my heroes, from like 70s, 80s, 90s, they didn't have YouTube videos telling them how to do everything step by step, and they had to figure some
Mhm.
things out. And I think sometimes when we figure things out for ourselves, we end up with better results in the end, and unique results, which, I mean, guys, let's face it, if you're trying to build a client list, having something that differentiates you, if you watch the marketing how-to videos and everybody talks about you need to differentiate yourself. Well, if you're doing everything exactly the same as everybody, you're not really differentiating yourself. All that to say, like, are you an object bed guy? Do you use the bed? Do you use a lot of individual objects? How do you approach kind of the mechanics of Atmos to maintain that kind of creative and emotional side that ultimately we're all going for when we're mixing?
Yeah, I'll let someone else like do the debate on whether or not you should use a bed or object. What I'm talking about is discrete location. So discrete speaker locations, whether or not that's an O bed or an actual bed, like I don't care about the technical side of it. What I care about is, have you panned this thing where it's coming out of 4 speakers instead of 2, and do you have a lot of phase cancellation and weird wishy-washy stuff because you did that? Like, I would rather make sure something is clear and defined in one speaker at the expense of the room. I'm not doing the room at the expense of the clarity of a part. So like, to me, discrete speaker locations are my first go-to. Like, what parts can I park in a location that keep it clear? And then how can I bring that out? So there's times where I'll pan in between places. So yes, I have essentially a 714 bed and then many objects that are in between locations. But there's times where I'll split speakers. Like, I don't have wides here. I don't have a 914. But like, I might put something in the wide position, which in my room is going to split it between the front and the sides. But I'm also just making sure, does that translate to 5.1? Does that translate to 714? Does that translate to headphones? Is that a good position for that? And for the most part, what I found is like equal volume coming out of mini speakers is a recipe for like instability. And by instability with phase or volumes, or even when it translates, like you might put something in the middle and the volume raised a little bit. So I would much rather just stick with, as much as I can, one part in one spot, and then what's the other part that I can just put in the sides that complements. So it's like, frequency wise, they're holding hands. It makes sense, but you get the depth without this in between wishy-washiness. So first thing I go to is discrete locations, but then there's some tricks that I have regarding like in between locations where I might turn the sides off. So that dial on the Pro Tools panner for side, I'll turn it off. And then when you pan it into the room, it's actually splitting between the front and the rear. And that to me is actually a more pleasing split than front sides most of the time. So like, even with drums or something, maybe putting those in the room at 90 on the Pro Tools panner with the sides off, you get a little bit in the back of the room. So you're creating play in the back of the room, but you're not creating a bunch of cymbal wash in all of the rest of the speakers. Another technique is I might start splitting the frequencies of parts, which I could show you an example of. But yeah, if there's only like one part and it feels limited to just put it in a spot, I might use some natural phase crossovers, like split the part into 3 and like split their EQ curve, or basically chop it up frequency wise, and then pan those in different locations and make sure it's cohesive, because that gets a little dangerous. But if it's cohesive, you've now got a part that went from 2 speakers to like out and surrounding you, but it still feels cohesive.
So you're just like duplicating the track and building your own crossovers into it to move it around. That's
cool. Or I've done things where I'll pan it into the room, but then the actual 714 has different EQ curves for the speakers in the room, if that makes sense. Like I might roll off the top of the rears so that it's like mostly low end, and the top part I might roll off the low end so it's mostly high, keep the mid range in the front, but that might be a 714 plug-in on a acoustic bus or something. Now I'm rambling.
No. This is and just for clarification for the audience, you are not talking about like the way you calibrate your system, because that would be crazy. We're talking about when you move something into a different location in the room, how you're treating that sound in that location.
Yes.
Right?
To me, it's a more manual way of upmixing, because I don't know exactly what upmix plugins are doing to decorrelate audio, but at times it does feel a little washy. Like upmix plugins, like And it's not as defined either, because sometimes an upmix plugin is like, take from stereo and put in 12 channels. Like the the panning isn't as defined. It's just kind of like you went from here to everywhere. So
Yeah.
like here's an example, if this is helpful. I've got this song that I did yesterday, and there's one acoustic part here. So here's the acoustic that I muted that was stereo. I duplicated it, and I actually have never done this kind of crossover before, where I did a band pass in the middle, and then the other one I'm doing a cut. So I've got the low end and the high end up front, and then this band pass is on the sides. And it worked. I panned it and I was like, oh, this works. Typically, I've done more of a traditional roll-off crossover thing. But yeah, like it
What
seemed to
made
work.
you think? What made you think to even try that? I guess.
Probably feeling like, oh, I'm limited right now. I'm limited by where I can pan something, because panning it in just in its full range doesn't feel right. It doesn't make sense. But it's like, can I leave certain areas of the frequency range, and can I spread out the frequency range? So that's a bit of that problem solving of like, what's the intention behind what I'm doing? Like, am I just panning things somewhere because I have real estate, or am I actually trying to extend? So like, one of the reasons that I chose that mid range there is because I think this the bass, or maybe it was some of the guitars, was already kind of like doing that in the front. So it's like, I feel like I can remove that from the acoustic there and put the acoustic in the sides with that band. So now the mids of the acoustic in the sides are holding hands with the mid of the electrics in the front. But then there's this part of the acoustics that's still like chucking in the front. So then it's like, okay, the loop has, actually this loop doesn't have a high, but we'll just say sometimes there might be a percussion or a shaker where it's like, this complements the high of the acoustic. So how can I separate those two things? Like, so that the highs of the acoustic are not in the same place as the highs of the percussion. So you're doing a bit of this like frequency focusing, like, or frequency extending. Parts aren't just like one thing. It's like they're a span of frequencies, right? So how can I best separate out those frequencies? But then you just got to make sure that, like, where you've panned it and when it comes back together, is it cohesive? Are they still like tethered together, or have you just like sliced and diced and really messed with the sound, mangled the sound?
Right. Okay, I'm not gonna get some work done this afternoon because I'm gonna try some of this. I think this brings up a question for me. So you're working in basically it's 714 setup for all intents and purposes. Did you ever put a center channel in? Last time I was at your place, you didn't have a center channel. So
It seems like that worked out.
I think so.
Almost nobody is using the center channel for music. When I play commercially released music, they omit the center almost always.
Yeah, I hear a mix of it. You do use the center channel, though. I listened on some of your stuff. You've got stuff in.
Well, I think that's from objects. So, like, if an object is moving, I can't control whether or not it's splitting the center. But if it's in that O bed, even stuff that might be in the center channel gets diverted out to the left and right as a phantom thing. But most of my tracks, I turn the center channel off. So even if it's like dead center, it's phantom focused the way it would be in a stereo mix, which helps me with like channel and compression stuff down the line.
Yeah. That reminds me of something I just want to clarify for some folks. When you were talking about turning off the sides, there is a control in the panner, in Pro Tools anyways. Sorry for all you guys who use other DAWs, but it's like that zone control. Oh, you're using those. Okay.
Yeah, so like literally turn those on or off. And I've also used this configuration button right here.
That's the one I was thinking of. There's like a zone selector in there that you can use that will basically it changes how the panner works. I'll just say that. Maybe I'll do a video on it at some point. But those are things I think, if you are working in immersive, it is worth taking some time to experiment with those kinds of things. I have not ever used that side percentage control, but I'm going to go play with that and experiment now.
Well, and what also could be nice, and the reason that you could utilize that is if your goal is to widen something out and like create space in the room, just that acoustic guitar part where I've cut the mids and then there's another track that has those mids and the crossovers are natural, and when it sums back together, if they were in the same speaker, it would sound like nothing happened. I could put the mids in the sides. I could position this acoustic that was split. Like that one's in the sides, so that's the mid. But this one, the one that has the low and the high, it's actually positioned into the room, but splitting between the front and rear. So like you're getting side, but now it's phantom focus side. You have a direct mid side, and then you quite literally have like phantom focused low and high. So it's all kind of like coming at you from the side, but it's less like pinpointed. It's just kind of like your whole side is utilized by the acoustic, Yeah. So and that's just techniques, like trying it out, what works, what doesn't work, what's a better position. Like it's mostly in the front, so like I'm not hearing any kind of wash when I move my head.
Mm-hmm.
If I turn off the front speakers, it's like, oh, there's stuff in Atmos. Like it.
Yeah, I like popping in and out of fold down to the full thing a lot to, does it actually feel immersive? When you're trying techniques and things like that, and maybe even just when you're in general mixing, do you find yourself checking a lot of the different fold downs, like 5.1s and stereos and things like that? I mean, I know, and maybe we'll talk about this. You have your own way of creating kind of, I don't even know that I would call it a fold down. Because you're creating a stereo and an Atmos at the same time, and they're unique
multed.
and together. It's
yeah, it's a multed signal. So I'm taking from the same sources, and like if I make an EQ move to a guitar, it's going to change it on both. But at the separated bus level, there's a stereo bus and then an Atmos bus that are mirroring each other to keep the same vibe, but I can separate them to do their own thing as needed. So it's not, I'm not relying on the Atmos to completely translate across the board. I'm separating those out so I can tweak each, but they're also like tethered together by the source material.
That makes sense to me because I have seen enough of your template to understand what's going on. And we are not doing a walkthrough on your template because it is very, well, there's
other walkthroughs.
Yeah, there's other walkthroughs, like Jeremy has gone through that stuff with you over on the Recording Studio Loser channel. We'll give Jeremy a shout out. He does cool stuff. But for you, it's like if you're coming in from the outside and looking at it, it's like, wow, that's a lot. But it's all really natural for you, the way you interact with it. You're not really thinking about things the way someone else would be. Like someone else, I think they're going to look at it and they're going to have to think engineer on it. But you engineered it that way so that you don't have to think about it.
Well, and anybody who comes in and looks at a console might be like, whoa, that's complicated. Or even a piano. Like, you look at it and you're like, why does it need all of these little mechanical things down line? But what you realize is the way that it was designed, it is the most efficient. Like, I tell people to go watch this video of Mark Rober talking about piano and the mechanics of, like, okay, a bell is like your simplest thing. Like, there's a key and you have a mallet and you hit the bell. But if you leave it on there, it deadens. So it's like, how do you hit the bell and then have it come off a little bit? So, like, you're solving one little problem at a time down the chain, to where you have a complex chain, but it serves a simple purpose. Each one of those things is necessary for the end result of the piano hit. But that's what my template is. It's complex so that when I put stuff through it, everything's kind of just in place and I can, like, easily work quickly,
Yeah.
So it's not a, like, complicated for the sake of just having more. Like, there's things that are like, everything in there has been honed down for a very specific reason. And I think everyone should do that. Like, the problem solving brain of an engineer is, like, how do you work, and honing in on problems. Like, what do you do most often? Like, are there repeated steps that you do? Put those repeated steps in an automated chain, whether it's in your template or have a button for it on SoundFlow to, like, repeat the step. So then you don't have to keep building and, like, creating architecture every time you're in a session.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. Warren streams sometimes on Twitch when he's mixing, and I've watched, and you do work fast. Like, I didn't know it was possible to mix as fast as you do with breakpoints. Because you, like,
on the automation line?
Yes. Because to me, I look at that and I'm like, ugh, this is so tedious. I mean, it's why I've got, 2 control surfaces in here. But then I watch you mix and I'm like, oh, you really have, like, figured out how to do it. Like that, I feel like the old guy. When I watch, it's like, okay, well, cool. It's like, because you're doing a lot of the same stuff I'm doing on faders, but you're doing it on breakpoints, and you're doing it at, like, that kind of efficiency level that I think a lot of console guys go, you can't really do that in the box. And it's like, but I watch you do it, and it's like, yeah, you can. So,
well, I think that came down to the decision of, how can I save mental energy, and how can I do something the fastest? And to me, if the trackball and my eyes are linked, like, I don't have to go somewhere else. I don't have to look somewhere else and reach somewhere else and hope that I hit the right thing. And I'm sure over time, like, I've had a Surface before and, like, tried to do that, and I just find myself gravitating back toward, well, if I just do everything with a trackball, be it plug-in, fader, automation, clicking things, my brain's already wired to make that as fast and efficient as possible. So it's like sticking with one thing makes you faster than dividing your attention among many things. So for me, that's why it's just an extension of what I do. So it's like, I just know that I can point and click around and drag and make an automation line. Doesn't mean I don't pop on write or latch and write a fader every now and then, but I'm also writing the fader from the trackball, so it's still the same motion, and I'm also focusing on one thing at a time. Like, I've found I don't want to have 24 faders in front of me that I, like, okay, I raised 3, but really, what did I do? Like, was I able to focus on those 3 things at once? And me, no. Like, I need to focus on the one thing that I did, notice that change, and move on. And I found that I can change those 3 things faster if I've focused on each one in sequence, as opposed to all 3 at once, and like, what did I do? I've got to assess, like, I might be faster just with the mouse. So that's my 2 cents on it.
You are fast with the mouse. I watched it because I've watched it and I'm like, oh wow. How do you, if you're doing that, you're focused on one thing. Is it natural for you to still be able to stay focused on that one thing and keep it within the context of everything you're doing? How do you do the one thing and then stay? I don't even know how to ask this question. Does it make sense?
I know what you're getting at, because what that is peripheral vision, peripheral hearing.
Yeah.
You know, like, you go to a movie theater, like there's a giant screen in front of you. You can't really focus on all of that at one time, but your eyes could find something. You still have the peripheral vision of everything that's going on around it. So when I'm mixing, yes, I might zoom in to a part to like either solo it or address something within the part. But still, if I'm listening to a mix and like an offender might be, this acoustic guitar just has a ring, just ooh, like whatever chord they play, that ooh is just there. So even though the rest of the song is going on, I have this little mental memory of like, all right, I've latched on to that frequency. I'm going to go hunt for it. Like I still hear everything. I'm going to click on an EQ. I'm going to find it. I'm going to change it. Okay, that took care of it in context. Move on. So it's like mental memory, but also like keeping the peripheral while you're still focusing on this one thing.
Yeah. That's cool. That's good stuff for all you guys you're still in stereo world. I mean, applicable to immersive as well, but good information for that. Let's get back to the immersive stuff, because that's what we're trying to talk about. What do you wish someone would feel when they're listening to an Atmos mix?
Yeah, the first thing is that, depending on what type of mix it is, like if I'm just trying to create a space, like to me, the Ivan Thieva song or some of the live stuff that I've done, like you're kind of just creating a space for that performance. And it feels, maybe it's a little more static of an Atmos mix. And it could be something where it's very apparent that the mix is all around you. But also, it could be so subtle that you just feel it. And then if you took it away, you'd miss it. So there's that like fine line of doing too much in the room and relying too heavily on the room, but like letting a mix come from this box in front of you outward. It's the same mix, same tone, same impact. You've just like extended where it lives. But then if you turned off the Atmos, you'd miss it and it would feel small. So I want, at least in that moment, what I want people to feel is like they may not know what's happening around them. Like I'm not swirling stuff around their head, but they can feel the air like breathe and move around them. Of course, that's like if they're listening in a room. If they're listening on headphones, I just want it to not sound wet like what Apple does. So I'm not going to get on a rant of what Apple does to it with their wet IR filter.
Yeah.
But yeah, if ideal conditions, if someone's listening to an Atmos mix, I just want it to feel like it breathes more and it has more like dimension than the box in front of you. Then going to the push and pull mix where like there's moments of it just being stereo and then there's something that comes in the room or there's little things that hit and catch your ear and ear candy. The first thing I want them to feel is like, oh yeah. Like I don't necessarily want them to turn and point and go like, oh, I heard that one thing out of that one speaker. I kind of just want them to be like, whoa, that moment blew me away. Like that moment was right for the song and the ingredients. Like there's songs that I work on that, especially with a chorus, like you're keeping it small up front. Maybe there's some things in the room, but there's definitely a moment where something lands, a chorus or a bridge, and like you can fill the room and it just washes around you in a good way. in those moments, I just want them to get goosebumps. Like, yes, like there was a payoff. There was this anticipation of like, there's speakers around me, but I don't know if I'm hearing anything. Oh, I'm hearing something now. Like, they get it. You know what I mean? It's more of a moment of feeling it rather than like, oh, I see what you did. You did this cool movement of everything everywhere. Okay. Like, I don't want them to know how the ingredients are put together. I just want them to feel like that was right.
Yeah, it's not about calling attention to what we're doing. It's just it's what works for the song in that moment.
Well, and another cool thing as well, like a mix that I really love commercially is like the Hans Zimmer soundtrack to Dune.
Oh, yeah.
And like there's one song in particular, I can't pronounce any of the names, so I don't remember off the top of my head which one it is. But it's like, I think it's like Leaving Chaldean or da da da.
Yeah.
That one. It keeps layering. Like the song itself is surrounding you, but it keeps layering, and you, as you're listening to it, you almost feel like they couldn't possibly use more of the room, and then they do. And it's like, no, they've maxed out how much of the room they can use, and then they keep using more of it. And it's like those layers just keep coming out of the room, and you're like, that feels great. You know, like things like that where I'm not focused on exactly where a part's coming from, but I feel pleasant about the real estate that was used.
That makes sense to me. Because I just want it to, I mean, I know for me, there are times where there are things that I want, like, I want that there. I want someone to hear it and I want them to hear it there. But there are other times I just want to envelop with something and not to have, like, I don't want people looking around like, oh, and then there's that, and then there's that. Like someone who's, and for someone who's got like the head tracking on in Apple Music to be like, oh, and doing all that kind of stuff. I mean, you can do that with the head tracking, but I don't think that was necessarily even the intent when they designed the head tracking in there. I think it has more to do with just part of how we image and perceive things in general. Like someone was talking about, it might have been Carrie Thomas even, talking about like how dogs will tilt their heads sometimes, and it's because of how they're sort of locating things. And even for us, just like the slight moves of our heads helps with that perception of things.
Yes. A static room response, like if you were to pan that movement, yes, you can localize it. Like one of the things I love right now is Sony VME, because it's the truest HRTF. And I mean, there's a reason for it. You have to go in and get your ears measured by a microphone in a 714 room. Okay, like it's a high bar of entry right now. I know they're trying to lower that bar of entry for people, but for sure, that's the best directionality I've heard out of a HRTF. And so, but even as a static thing, like, yes, you can locate it, but there's something about being in a room, especially while I'm mixing. I'll pan something somewhere, and even just that little head tilt, the change in response of the room, like affects the way you're hearing it to where a static could never do that.
Yeah, the Sony thing is cool. I got measured for that last time I was in Nashville, and that was the first time I heard something on headphones where it actually put things in front of me. Because for me, if I'm listening to that kind of binauralized thing, anything that, you know, listening on speakers feels like it's out in front, it always is like right here. I can get a sense of like for me, I can get a sense of things behind me. Like I still remember one of the first, like right after I put all the Atmos stuff in, I was messing around with some stems of some song, and there was like a voice talking in it, and I had, you know, because just experimenting, so I'd put it in the back behind me, and I'd forgotten about it for a while, and when it got to that part again, it made me It made me jump because I thought someone was in my room right behind me on
Hmm.
headphones. You know, not necessarily the creative intent I was going for in my experimentation. So, okay, I'm going to move that in general. But I think, that's why you need to play around with some of this stuff when you're getting started. But also just for how the binaural works. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. With the Sony thing, he didn't even need to tell me because I knew the shtick going in, how they were going to do this and measuring
Yeah.
it, and it's like, no, you are listening on the headphones. And it's like, yeah, I know I'm on the headphones because you're trying to trick it. And I could just tell, like, oh, this works pretty good. Now, I did have somebody tell me, because they said, have you tried that in your studio? Because I've got the Impulse, and
Hmm.
I I finally installed it about a month ago, and then I got busy and didn't get a chance to try it. So I still haven't tried it in my own studio. But he said, try it in your own studio, because when part of his theory was part of why it works so well when you go through their process, because for those of you who aren't familiar with this, with the Sony VME thing, you go into a studio that's Atmos, like for the way I did it, and probably the way you've done it, was we were in an Atmos studio. They put like little microphones in your ears, and then they run a whole bunch of sweeps and everything, and it runs some kind of. They've got some crazy program that runs, and you can see like the progress bar calculating, and then they play you a little bit on the speakers, and then you play some on the headphones, and you think that you're still listening to the speakers, but you're actually listening on headphones. And it's a cool little. In that context, it feels a little like parlor tricky to me in a way, but it was cool. I need to try it in here though, because
Yeah, I think part of the reason why it worked is because you were in that space looking at the speakers and that mental memory of like, I just heard those speakers. Now I'm hearing it in the headphones and I still am pinpointing where those were. It's great. You get into your room or even a room without speakers and you don't have the visual cues, it may feel less magical, but like I did that and I took it home, and even before I did the VME and after, I had bought some DAP in-ear mics, so probably the same thing they're using. I also tried the Fritz head, the Neumann Fritz head with Josh in this room, and tried to create IRs of this room. Basically, the same sweeps coming out of each speaker through my ears and also through the Fritz head. Could I put that through like a Waves IR and do the exact same thing in my room? And what I found is the localization is the same. Like, it was the same as VME, and even VME, the localization is great. But as soon as you start playing music through it, the curve and the tone of the music is kind of different. Like, even song to song, it's a little different. Like, it's not true to the response of the song. And so while I would trust it with positioning, I don't know that I would trust it with tone and exact like balance. But that being said, if you go buy some in-ear microphones, which I wouldn't recommend the cheap one. I tried the cheap one that's like $200. It doesn't work. Unfortunately, you have to get the $1,200 DAP one for it to work. That really like goes in your ear. But you could sit there with those, get a response, run it through Waves IR, and you might have to do some EQing on the back end, channel to channel, but like you could have an impulse response of your room or someone else's room based on that. And it's kind of the same thing they're doing with Sony, but they're doing it a lot better. Like
yeah.
they've got the whole technology and research behind them. But I know I've talked with their reps, and they're doing things to try and make it a lot more accessible for people. And I know that it's only going to get better over time, right? Like
Right.
there may come a day when we do have that head tracking and we can feel the change directionally, where you can create your own custom HRTF where you're located, as opposed to like having to come to Nashville, wherever Sony is, at any given month. Yeah, enough about Sony though. That's the biggest problem right now with Atmos is HRTF. People just don't have their own personalized binaural listening, and Apple making it sound washy, like, is just not going to be the best experience.
And I think, the other thing you even mentioned in there too, the visual side of things, I think we take for granted how much what we see plays into our perception of what we hear. I mean, if you just sit and close your eyes, you get a different experience than if you can actually see something and see where things are. I think that's part of why I think Dolby's recommendation is, they actually recommend cover all your speakers, like hide them in your space, which, I mean, I would love to do at some point. I was in like a home theater, like dealer place, and we were in like one of their flagship rooms, and you walked in and you couldn't see any speakers, and it was kind of cool to just listen that way.
Well, and in the end, not to get nihilistic about all of it, but like, okay, if we're mixing visually, it's the same reason why people talk about, like, are you mixing with your eyes or are you mixing with your ears? Like, the speakers might play into if you're mixing Atmos with your eyes. So, like, can you really just listen with your ears and position things and do it? Like, yes, fall back on that for sure. In the end, like, did you get the job done? Like, what helped you get the job done efficiently, under budget, like, for the client in the right amount of time with the right effectiveness for the market? Yeah.
Are there any tools that you find really helpful for working in Atmos that are maybe a little more specific to Atmos?
Well, I'm going to break your heart because, like, to me, because of Atmos, it's made me rely on FabFilter even more than I did in stereo. Even though, like, I already was so reliant on FabFilter, to me, FabFilter is like the best friend of anybody working in stereo and Atmos. There's so much that you can do to help both mixes, like, especially with side chaining, just about anything. And that's been huge, like being able to side chain things in Atmos. So, like, plugins that side chain are huge for me in Atmos. Like, if there's a compressor that doesn't have a sidechain key, like, chances are I'm not using it in Atmos. And if I'm not using it in Atmos and I want to be doing the same thing in stereo, chances are I'm not going to use it in stereo either. So, like, I'm picking my tools based on what covers the most ground. So to me, FabFilter is huge for that. But Atmos specific, I would say the Liquid Sonics verbs. I use the Energy Panner for stuff every now and then. But then that's pretty much it, just because I'm not up mixing things a ton. And if I am up mixing, it's in this manual way with EQ or separating parts out or even just doing my own decorrelation. Like, I might have the primary part parked in a position, and then I might throw something in the back with saturation, verb, time delay, like wobble. Like, I might use a couple of different tricks to separate it from that part, but I've manually done that. I haven't relied on a plugin to, like, sparse it out. Yeah. So unfortunately, I'm not up on all the Atmos plugins.
No, I think this is a good thing for people to hear because, part of why I want to ask the question is so that people understand, like, yes, there are some specific tools out there designed for immersive mixing, but most of what we do is with just the stuff we've been using.
It's not even learning how to repurpose it. It's like being okay with what you already have. And again, with the attention thing, like, if you have 100 plugins that you're trying to use and flip between for any given moment, man, I could do stuff with the FabFilter bundle because I know it in and out and I use it across the board. And then you're also looking for use cases of like this thing with the acoustic. Like, man, I haven't done a bandpass and a cut separation before for panning. Like, let me just try it because I know how to do it there and it worked. So it's like sticking with what you know and what you're familiar with and just like expanding, solving the problem at the moment with the tools you know how to use, to me is better than, let me get this one plugin that costs $300 that like will maybe do this thing. Like, go watch a Dan Warhol video and figure out how to do it with the plugins you already have, you know?
But I gotta ask you now though, because you're talking about side chaining, which I think a lot of people go a little side chain crazy, but I know that you do things with intention and for good reasons. So what are you doing with side chaining? I mean, I use a side chain on like a bus compressor on my sort of Atmos mix bus. And there's the typical stuff that you might, side chain, like the kick and bass. I mean, I do that kind of stuff. I mean, I did a video for Waves on doing that with one of their plugins, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, something like that. Are there unique things that you are doing with side chaining that I am not thinking about?
So I'm using side chaining in two ways. One is like the normal way where like you want something to listen to this thing, and based on this thing, it will move that thing. Like
right.
creating movement and focus. So like getting something out of the way. That's your typical use of sidechain. So I'm very intentional with how I use that. The other way I'm using sidechain is linking information together, because especially in the Atmos world, if you've panned things around, you've separated those tracks to where if you push that through compression or limiting, each of those channels is no longer affecting it at the summed value, right? So I use the sidechain to create sums. So maybe there's a drums sum, maybe there's a music sum of like all the instrument parts that are spread out in Atmos, but like all the instruments are summed at a certain level, and all the tracks like you would send through a stereo bus, I have a sidechain key so that if I want the compressor to compress my entire Atmos mix, it's doing it based on all the channels. So that to me is like linking the mix together, where if the left and right is real heavy and it's just channel based, your compressors are going to be compressing and the backs aren't compressing at all because there's not enough signal for that threshold. Now you can tune it. You can bring that threshold down so it's kind of doing the same thing in any given moment. But what's better about that, I think, is a key that you've dialed in. And the beautiful thing about that key as well is I can tune it. Like I can pick the levels. Like if I want the drum affecting that key more, or if I want the vocals affecting that key less, I can bring that down, or I can carve it up. Oh, I don't want the bass muddying up too much. I really just want those instruments listening to that mid-range response. So that's how I'm using sidechain and Atmos.
Yeah, and now we're giving away too many secrets. Sorry. Yeah, that's kind of what I hate to even bring this up. LFE, what do you...
Well,
yay, nay,
here's the short answer. It's a variable. So if you're comfortable with the unknown variable, like send signal to it. That's fine. I think, especially with how people's systems are, like the variable in how it's crossed over or base managed, if it's sending duplicate signal, like obviously if there's left and right information and you have a base in there, but then your system is base managed to send to the LFE, well, the base is already sending there, and then you're duplicating the signal, sending LFE to that. But then on someone's system, does it come back the same way as your system? I just tend to think like keep it clean. Like to me, it's a variable. I'd rather percussive things go in the LFE, so like it's there and then it's not, as opposed to a tonal thing. Because a tonal thing, especially if it's duplicated and crossed over in weird ways down the line, you might get cancellations. Like I've done it before where I've mixed a song And the LFE feels great in the room. It feels great in binaural. You flip to the spatial and it's gone. Like this, whatever the spatial did to it, it inverted the phase and the bass is all gone. So I just don't like those unknown variables. So it's like, if you can control it, utilize it, or if you can just separate it out. Like the other day, I had a true bass guitar, and then a sub. There was like this synth sub in there. And the synth sub was like rolled off all the way to 100. So I was like, the only place that sub lives is the LFE channel. And then the bass is everywhere. And of course, I'm making sure in the fold down it came together. But it's like, instead of putting that in the left and right with the bass, let me put that thing that's under 100 in the LFE channel, and it makes sense. But overall, I just don't like variables. I'd rather control what someone's listening to.
All right, so before we wrap this up, what do you think about the future of Atmos immersive mixing? Like, where are we headed?
Yeah. I think to make it sustainable, it shouldn't be two separate processes to mix something. That's why I love doing both stereo and Atmos at the same time. But even from a creation standpoint, the reason that you double a guitar is because you have two speakers and someone figured out that it's nice and pleasing to have like two complementary guitars spread out. So from a parts and production and songwriting perspective, what will really be nice is when creators think about their parts and layers in a 3D space. Like, how can I not just add, but how can I separate and complement parts in order to prepare them for an Atmos space? And then on top of it, how can I capture this performance, not just with two mics because we have stereo, but maybe extra room mics where it's a bit of an automatic Atmos mix. Like, I don't want to sound lazy about it, except to say, like, if you get two channels of a piano, you know where you're putting those two channels, like left and right. But unless you do something else intentional with it. But if you're going to create a space of a performance, you could really capture that beforehand and not have to think too much about where your parts go. So from a creation perspective, people thinking about Atmos beforehand would be great. And then thinking how to solve those problems. Like, there have been some times where I only have the master. It's like, what do you do to create an Atmos mix out of just a master? That fun mental gymnastic of like, this has never been done before. I've never encountered this problem before. Maybe it's never been done ever. Let me figure out how to do it and do it justice. That mindset of like problem solving and discovering, and don't just do it because someone on the internet told you to do it, or follow these rules and you'll have an Atmos mix. It's like, what's right in front of you, and how can you like push the boundary just a little bit? Like, try something out to push the boundary, and that's where the wisdom comes in. You'll either learn, bad idea, that didn't work in that situation. Maybe you revisit on another song, or it worked. Wow, I have a new trick in my bag. So, yeah, just like it's problem solving, looking for the next thing to push the boundary.
That's cool. Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, and the caveat with all of that is, don't just do it because you can. Like, just because you have the real estate doesn't mean it should be on all the time. Learn and experience the maturity of less, and like keeping things conservative, and then swell into the room, or have little parts that come in and out. Do an entire Atmos mix where you don't really notice it until you take it away and then you miss it. Like, can you be subtle with your stuff? Learning restraint.
That's cool.
I'll leave it there.
That's good stuff. Before we go, I need to mention, Warren, you got a website. You've got a lot of great resources on that website for people working in Atmos. Like, people can get a hold of your template. I'm assuming that you even do like video walkthroughs of that kind of stuff if someone picks that up. Any of that stuff you want to tell people about and point them to?
Yeah, I mean, what started years ago of, like I mentioned before at the beginning, I have a document that keeps all the metrics for everything I've ever worked on. Uh, what started as, oh, this would be helpful for people because like musicians aren't organized that way. So like, how can I package that together? Then it was, what extra settings can I throw in there to make it worth it for people to want this package? Then let's throw some samples. Let's throw this. Let's throw a template. So it just grew over time where I tried to curate a lot of tools, settings, samples, and videos to help equip engineers with stuff they just may not have or use. Like this isn't, there's probably a lot of people where it's like, you want my flavor, you want my samples, you want to do it my way. Here's my stuff. This is more like, this is what's helped me. So I'm curating it based on what you may not have. Like you may not have the Atmos Delta Excel sheet that lets you put in a whole album of stereo and learn the LUFs of the stereo to where you translate that in Atmos, where not every Atmos is at minus 18. It's at the proper level compared to the stereo. So when you listen through the album, it's in the right volume relative to the stereo. So it's like a tool that like people might not have, that's there. Or like my room IR, I just added that. The binaural thing I was talking about, I just added that to the pack. So there's lots of either educational things, you can bundle them together or just get little things. Hopefully it just equips engineers to like have stuff they didn't before.
Cool. That's great. So, Warren, thank you so much for joining me today and chatting. I know I got a lot out of this. I hope everybody else does as well. I'll put a link to Warren's website down below in the comments. Go check it out and go listen to some of the stuff that he's done. Your stuff sounds great.
Thanks, man. Well, I appreciate you. Thankful for your friendship and thankful for what you do, like, in this community.
Thanks, man.